I worked for a domestic violence nonprofit, and I realized only at that time that it does take a lot. There's a psychology behind domestic violence, and there's a psychology behind people that suffer and those types of things. And I looked at it like he might have hit you, you might have hit him, like you guys like move on. There's so much more than that. And it really made me appreciate kind of like and understand the different perspective of what you're dealing with in these cases.
Well, and I think people don't look at the emotional part of this. They're just like, oh, well, it's very black and white. Someone hit you and you shouldn't be with them.
Yeah. Where
these victims, whether it's male or female, are kind of taught or conditioned to think what is happening to them is their fault.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Only Lawsuits podcast. Today we have an incredible guest. I'm so happy to have her. You know, she has a very, very busy schedule and she decided to join us today. You've probably seen billboards of her all around Central Florida. She's a personal injury attorney, Mrs. Shannon Snedaker.
Hi, thank you.
Shannon, tell us about your law firm. What's it called?
So Snedaker Law. Very original.
Yeah.
My last name makes it pretty easy, as well as my partner's last name, who everybody thinks is my husband. He's not. He's my brother-in-law. So we're just going to clear the air right now that my law partner, Tim Snedaker, is my brother-in-law, not my husband.
You know, that's actually very, I never would have guessed that, because it's very often you see lawyers get married and then they just partner up together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, wow, that's
especially
actually pretty
with the
interesting.
same last name.
Yes. And it gets really confusing because then they meet my husband, who looks very similar to my partner. And so they both get mixed up all the time. I'm like, no, it's my husband today, not my law partner. Nope, now it's my law partner.
Oh, man.
So anyway, so we're a personal injury law firm. That's all we do. That's all we focus on. That's all I've ever done my whole career, from defense side to now the side with the soul, as they like to say. So we represent all sorts of clients who have been injured by somebody else, and we help get them justice.
You said you switched from defense to plaintiff's work. I've always only done plaintiff's work. That, just like you said, we're the side with the soul, per se. One of the big things I'd like to ask you is, I always found it hard for me to even consider going to defense because just the way I was wired. But I was working in plaintiff's firms from the very beginning. What made you make the flip to defense, or from defense to plaintiffs?
I mean, circumstances, just the way my career took me. But I was actually the opposite. I was always working in defense firms starting out. So defending hospitals and doctors and nursing homes. And so that's where I thought I was going to be. And I was probably exposed to the other side, where I'm watching the plaintiffs on the other side of the table cry about losing a loved one or something really tragic that happened. And it's really hard as a defense attorney sometimes to question those people. And so I was more drawn to those individuals than I was to the hospital or defending them and protecting the big guy. I wanted to protect the little person.
Interesting. Yeah. So, and I always thought of it, from my perspective, I always thought about I always felt like the big corporations always had the money to get the good lawyers and that financial backing, knowing that, they're taking, I always thought about it as taking advantage of the little people. I always wanted to fight for the underdog. And, thankfully you made your switch to the good side. But I've got friends of mine, one that's been a guest on our podcast before, he tried to make the flip to plaintiff's work. And he literally morally was unable to do it. So I think it's funny when you really ask a lawyer why they do certain things in their career. It's just all about how you engage with your career and the people you engage with that ends up leading you to your path, so it's interesting.
Well, and I think that if you're representing plaintiffs, you're able to talk to people.
Yeah.
Not that defense attorneys can't, but I think it's easier to talk to a really educated person sometimes versus a plaintiff who, for the most part, is a more lay person. So you have to get down to their level and explain it to them and make them understand and really be a scholar of the law and explain, where defense attorneys don't have to do that as much with their clients.
Gotcha. And yeah, I mean, it's also good. We don't always have to bill.
That's the best part.
Sadly, I don't only do exclusive like auto accidents and personal injury stuff. I do a mix of things. So Farah's still got a bill and we've got to track our hours. But yeah, that's awesome, man. I people will probably wonder why I, as a personal injury attorney, would invite another personal injury attorney on, a podcast that we do. It's real simple. We're a big community. There's a lot of people to go around, and lawyers, you can't judge. There's no one lawyer that fits one type of person. Every single lawyer is different. You should always pick a lawyer that you're comfortable with. So, because there's a lot of people that might not be comfortable with my style, my approach, and Shannon might be the attorney that they would want. And that's okay. I'm fine with that. Like I love embracing, my competition, number one, because we can compete against one another and become better. But more importantly, we are colleagues in this profession. So I really do appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
So let's jump into it. Since we just introduced ourselves as PI lawyers, Josh, I think this is a great time to talk about someone going against us and calling us ambulance chasers.
Oh, Tony, not Tony Busby, but Jay-Z's legal team.
Yeah. Shannon, what are your thoughts about being called an ambulance chaser?
I mean, we just have a bad rap, right? I mean, why do they call us that? I mean, I get it. But I mean, I think people think that we're just out there for the money. I mean, look around Central Florida. I know I have billboards, but I mean, there's tons of boards out there that suggest it's all about the money. And so why wouldn't we chase the ambulance if it's going to create a check for not only our clients, but ourselves? So I understand where the name comes from. I think it's just not really representing the majority of personal injury attorneys in the United States, and especially in Central Florida. I think we all are out there for the right reasons.
Farah's family, she has some doctors in her family, and her dad's actually a doctor.
Yeah.
Mine too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We can talk about that after. Yeah.
So that's actually interesting. How do you, because look, we're the people chasing down doctors for malpractice cases. How does your family feel, or have you ever had that situation where you've engaged with family members about what you do for work and so on and so forth?
I have those discussions with my dad almost every day. And I think it's because it just keeps things interesting. It's a fun discourse, and it keeps us both really honest though, about what we're doing. If you can critique both sides and see both sides, it helps you have a more level-headed view of an overall view of what's going on. And, before I actually applied to work at a plaintiff's med mal firm because I'm just I know about this stuff. My family's medical. They specifically did not choose me because my dad was a doctor. They're no, You're not going to be able to see it from our client's perspective. I'm actually I can. Doctors can be wrong. My dad's wrong all the time.
I tell my dad he's wrong.
I do.
Well, this is an interesting question for both you and Shannon, Mike, is that why are ambulance chasers, quote unquote, so important for the everyday person? Because usually you'll have an insurance company saying, hey, you have to deal with us directly, or you should deal with us directly. Why is it important for these people to go seek an attorney after a medical malpractice claim or being in an accident?
So Shannon, you take a stab at it. You've been doing it longer than I have, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that attorneys can be the catalyst to change. So even though the incident with the client, it happened to them specifically, and it's their story can be, the catalyst to change for others, so that story doesn't ring true with someone else down the road. I mean, we look at how many labels are on products, for example, or new policies and procedures for hospitals, or warning labels, or whatever it is. More likely than not, that came because something bad happened, and the attorney helped get justice not only for that client, but potentially down the road for others.
Yeah, and I can't agree with you more. I think labeling attorneys as ambulance chasers is so disingenuous to what we really do, because we do bring the change. I mean, attorneys like Shannon, attorneys like myself, the one thing that I can go to sleep at night and say, you know, people are saying our insurance rates are going up because of people like me. Well, you know what? I guarantee you, your kids, you yourself, and your family members are in a lot safer place than if we weren't around. Because if you look back at the Ford Explorer with the Firestones, right? Firestone, after they got sued and all of those lawsuits came, do you know how safe of a tire they are? I believe I read statistics that, you know, after that lawsuit situation occurred, the safety ratings of tires went up across the board. Why? Because it's a threat. It's a threat to the entire industry, not just one person. So yes, there is going to be someone that gets hit by an attorney, but it sends shockwaves throughout the industry that makes things safer, right? Another great example is the issues with when it comes to how lenders for houses treat people. Think about back during the civil rights movement and the issues with people getting loans just because of the color of their skin. If it wasn't for lawyers that went and litigated stuff, we wouldn't have certain protections built in to the U.S. Constitution, number one, and then also into lending, right? People can own houses despite the color of their skin, right? So there's a lot of good we as lawyers do. And yes, we do it for money, but you know how much it costs to go to law school?
I mean, no one likes lawyers until you need one. That's basically it. And I genuinely don't know why we get as bad a rap as like dentists. Like when you go to the dentist, you like leave in pain. Like your wallet might be hurting after you leave a lawyer's office, but we're taking care of your problem.
Well, what I like to think about is like, look, I was just talking about it before with Shannon. Like I literally had to leave today. My son got his first set of shots for his first 2 months. I wasn't even there to, help him deal with his pain that he's going through. Why? Because I had to be back in the office to meet with a client. And, so it's like, you're not only paying for me to take care of your problem, you're paying for me to push my problems aside for your problem. Time is the most valuable thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll never be able to get that moment of my son's life back, let alone my own. So it's like, when you really think about it, yes, we charge a lot of money, but it's also the fact that we bring you the peace of mind you obviously couldn't get on your own too. So
Right.
It's interesting.
Right. Well, and we help hold people accountable too, right? That's part of it.
Yeah.
And people don't understand. I was having this conversation on the way here with a girlfriend. It's like people try to Google and represent themselves and they're like, I don't need to do that. Lawyers are just crooks. I'm like, are you going to use WebMD for your surgery?
They do. People do. They diagnose themselves. TikTok. Right. Everyone's doing it.
Oh.
Right. Which is dangerous. But at the end of the day, they're going to go to that doctor or professional to get the help they need. And for the most part, there isn't a bad rap for physicians. I guess some do, but attorneys, like we're here to help people. That's really, what drives us to become lawyers. Most of us, right? We have motivation and desire to help people be better all across the board.
This is a great opportunity going back to the original, point of Jay-Z. Look at what happened when Jay-Z or the attorney filed the civil case for Cassie and Diddy, right? Look at what's now happened. The people that have otherwise been very have taken advantage of people for so many years because they're in a high position of authority. They're finally being brought to justice. Now, we don't know if they're innocent until proven guilty, right? We're not criminal lawyers, but what are your thoughts on the Diddy Jay-Z situation going on? Obviously, it's a very serious situation, but there's a criminal aspect and a civil aspect. Tell me some of your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm probably going to focus my thoughts on just the attorneys that they're hiring. As attorneys, we're evaluating the clients and, we go in there as objectively as possible, right? But I'm sure to these women where these attorneys chose to take their case, they believe in them. And if it's hard to do that, it's hard to come forward and have an attorney. And so for an attorney to evaluate something and actually believe in their case and yes, there has been no ruling yet, so we don't know how the facts and discovery and all that's going to pan out. But I just think for an attorney to believe enough in that person, that person clearly needed someone like that to be their voice.
It led to other people filing, so, but Far and I, we've dealt with some very, very complicated clients that we've tried advocating for. Tell us some of how do you feel when you're dealing with a client that we know is clearly a little, different?
I feel like, first of all, there's going to be a lot of hand holding before they even sign. You kind of just have to gauge, like we were saying on a previous episode, how good of a narrator they're going to be, how reliable of a narrator they are, how spooked are they. You have to kind of, also just, you have to tell them what to expect too, because a lot of times in these specific types of scenarios, they're gonna rip you apart, especially like because they're trying to defend their client. The other attorney's gonna come at you hard, and they're gonna ask you things that are really personal, and you just have to make sure that they're ready for that. And it's pretty clear whether or not they're ready for that.
Yeah. And that's the one thing that, going back to Shannon's point, is like we try to vet people as much as possible. So while Farah's not a lawyer yet, she knows what I look for, and we kind of make it to where they got to go through her first. And if they can withstand, the scrutiny of what she knows I'm going to do, then they go to me and we start, really analyzing it. And thankfully we don't have to do it too much in an auto accident case or a personal injury case, but some of the other cases we handle, we've got to some of the family cases we handle, we've just dealt with some real pieces of work. And, I regret a lot of clients sometimes in certain practice areas. But.
Well, that's a good segue, right? Because, Shannon, you're an advocate for sexual assault cases. And when you look at this case primarily, the victim has come forward and recanted certain details that transpired that night. How does that affect the case in a negative manner? And does it now call into question Tony Busby's legal team and potential clients that are now coming forward?
So I've had the opportunity to represent, I'll say, survivors of sexual abuse cases, human trafficking cases against various entities in Central Florida. And, I have a soft spot for those people. So I'm just going to preface my comments with that. But to what you all were speaking before, when you're evaluating them, they're on a journey of recovering from trauma. Yeah. And so if it's hard for them to talk about, they need to have someone who understands them and can hear them, and also evaluate where they are in the process of being able to advocate for themselves, because eventually they're going to have to be deposed or talk or retell their story and relive the trauma. Mm-hmm. And if they're not in a place mentally to do that, then that's negatively going to have a bad impact on the case, because without their story and without them being able to articulate all the things that happened to them, while it be traumatic, they're gonna, it's not going to stand as strong as you would want. And you would hate to, as an attorney, I know I hate it, to put people through the trauma. I mean, and the trauma can be these sex cases, or it could be, the death of a child. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they have to replay this, and they have to be able to talk about it. Because insurance companies, as we know, they don't just hand over money. Mm-hmm. They fight, they defend. That's their job, right? So we have to make sure we get them ready. And I forget your second question about the legal team that is going against Jay-Z.
How does it make them look based off of her recanting some of the portions of her story?
How does it make the attorneys look?
Yeah,
I think that it at least from my perspective, shows that the survivors, can talk to them, and that they're going to believe them and listen to them and fight for them. So I think it sends a good message out there to victims, and that's why you see this ripple effect in the Me Too movement. Once one speaks up and they find a safe place, then the other ones feel safe and they go to the same place.
Gotcha. So that's an interesting perspective, because for me, I actually felt like it hurt the attorneys, it hurt the potential ability for the attorney to be interpreted as a valid attorney that vetted his client. But I think you made a great point when you stated, there is a lot of trauma, and sometimes it is hard. That path to deal with that trauma is very, very difficult. And that brought me back to, a lot of people don't even know this, is when I was in law school, I actually did some work for a nonprofit here in Florida where we advocated for women or domestic violence survivors, and sadly, a lot of them were women. But doesn't mean men aren't domestically violenced. I personally know a male that was domestically violenced. So I'm not going to say who it was, but it's really funny. A lot of stories.
Oh my God.
Domestic violence isn't funny, but all right, it was my brother. But it was my brother.
Which one?
I'm not going to say.
All right.
He listens to the podcast, so he's going to laugh when he hears this.
Okay.
But
But
it was.
You think he's gonna laugh?
Oh, he's gonna crack up.
Dox him.
So it is a funny story.
We'll bring him on as a guest to talk about domestic violence. But I worked for a domestic violence nonprofit, and I realized only at that time that it does take a lot. There's a psychology behind domestic violence, and there's a psychology behind people that suffer and those types of things. And I looked at it like, look, he might have hit you, you might have hit him, like, you guys, like, move on. There's so much more than that. Yes. So much more than that. And it really made me appreciate kind of like and understand the different perspective of what you're dealing with in these cases. So
yeah, and the statistics are even it takes, I think, on average 7 times for the woman to leave. Like, she has to leave 7 times before she actually does it. And that's an average.
Wow.
Well, and I think people don't look at the emotional part of this. They're just like, oh, well, it's very black and white. Someone hit you and you shouldn't be with them.
Yeah.
Where these victims, whether it's male or female, are kind of taught or conditioned to think what is happening to them is their fault.
Yeah.
That's why you don't look at the person who's abusing you as the person who is necessarily abusive. You're like, oh, it's me. If I was better, they wouldn't do that to me. So, I mean, back to the attorney, Busby, I mean, I think that he's sending a message that he's someone who understands. Yeah. I'm not just here as a lawyer, and I see you as a person. I'm going to understand the trauma, because in reality, as personal injury attorneys, you have to understand trauma, or you're not going to be able to connect and advocate for your client and make them comfortable coming out in a courtroom where it's a very formal space.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize, look, I had a jury trial we did like 3 weeks ago, right? And what the main thing that I always like to do when I'm doing my closing arguments, and I've done it in several trials, is I will reiterate, listen, there's one thing that I can't do, right? I can't uninjure my client, right? Mm-hmm. The only way that we as plaintiffs lawyers, we as personal injury lawyers can do anything for our client, because the only way it's getting some sort of compensation. We can't fix the broken leg. We can't fix the, damaged vertebrae. So it's either they get money or they just do nothing, and then this person moves on with their life. So it's like, I think when people need to really realize that, like, we're just lawyers, right? We can only do so much. We can't fix these people's problems. But if the only thing we can do is try to get them compensation to help with dealing with those problems, right? So,
right. And that's why closure.
And that's why people file civil suits.
Yeah.
For monies.
Penalizing people that do bad stuff and getting paid is not a bad thing for me.
Speaking of people who do bad stuff, Starbucks.
Oh, Starbucks and Danica Patrick. So, Mike, you were the one who actually told us about this story. So tell us a little bit more about what happened to her.
So evidently, Danica Patrick, she's I believe she's a racer, or she used to race.
Race car driver.
Race car driver, ex of Jets QB Aaron Rodgers.
Was she married to Jets?
No, they weren't married, but they were going out
ex-girlfriend?
Hey, she can be famous on her own,
yeah,
all right?
Yeah.
She doesn't need
she don't need no man,
ex.
Josh.
I'm a hardcore Jets fan, man. So
and how's that going for you?
We've had 2 terrible seasons with him running.
I know nothing about sports, but I knew that would hit. I knew that would strike a nerve.
We haven't won a Super Bowl since 1969, folks. 1969. But you know what? I'm still a lifelong Jets fan.
69, good number. No, I'm just kidding. But no, so she evidently got burned by Starbucks, a Starbucks Americano. So she's going to be subject to the Americano lawsuit system, I guess. But no, evidently Starbucks still chose to disregard the McDonald's lawsuit that in which there was a clear establishment like, look, you got to make products kind of safe for people, right? And no matter who you are, it can happen to Danica Patrick, it can happen to anyone, right?
Yeah.
And
it kind of sucks that they did it to Danica Patrick. I mean, I'm happy about it because I think they should be held accountable, but still.
well, it'll bring more light to the situation, but more importantly, like, this is something they blatantly disregarded. Like, we saw very, very famous case. The McDonald's coffee case is something they teach in law school. Very famous case, and for them to still make a stupid mistake to make their coffee that hot is ridiculous, right? So, I mean, Shannon, tell me what are your thoughts when you saw this case?
So I haven't seen all the specifics. Do you all know how the coffee allegedly burned her? Like, was the lid not secured? Did she just spill it? Does anybody know?
I didn't do too much research on it. I just saw that she was burned, and I think Starbucks is being, tied to it. So
yeah,
it was pretty substantial too. It was a pretty substantial.
Here's
burn.
a good point. Talk to me when you're analyzing a case like this. What do you look for?
Yeah, I mean, I want to look, first of all, what was your order? Because I know when I go to Starbucks, I order extra hot because I want my coffee extra hot and I microwave it.
That's a really valid point.
So, or was it a kid cup? Like one of my best friends, we joke because I'm always extra hot and she's kid temperature. So there is different temperature at Starbucks.
I didn't even know you could do that.
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah,
either.
I didn't know that you could do that either.
So what is the extra hot? What is the kid temperature? And then what's the temperature? I mean, I would get an expert involved right away to have someone testify or give an opinion, write a report about, what temperature it has to be in order to cause that type of burn. So did it go through clothing, or was it just on the skin, or was there something wrong with the lid? Because I know sometimes the lids, if they hit the seam the right way, they fall off. So is this a lid problem? Is it a temperature problem? Was it something that the plaintiff did on their own, just not paying attention, and it spilled and it was based on their order? So these are all things I would think about if it was my case, and I clearly don't have any details because I haven't read about it.
And
if you're out there and you're a barista, hit us up.
There's also a lot of things. I've had some coffee cases too, and one of the things that I like how you mentioned. Yeah, we're not going to talk about the coffee case. But one of the things that I looked at in that coffee case that came through my whole theory of liability was actually something you hit on, is the lids and the cup, right? Because let's be honest, a lot of franchises, they are in the business of making money, right? So I believe, one of the theories that I looked at when I analyzed some of these types of cases, I look at, okay, did the company try to cut corners and buy a cheap cup? Because if you look at the way they put the lids on the cup, you got to put a pressure on the lid to apply it. So if you are willing to spare some change to get a cheaper cup and that cup bends a little bit, it combined with the heat, combined with the pressure, it automatically creates a defective product. And you then open up a bigger concept of liability when it comes to, something that happened to someone. Right. So that's one of the coolest things about these cases, even though, you may have ordered your cup hot and maybe you wanted that hot coffee, but you would still rely on the company giving you a product that could withstand the heat that they were, providing to you. So
right. Well, not cause injury.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, no one's expecting to order a coffee and have 3rd-degree burns, right? I mean, there should be a reasonable expectation that you're going to be safe even if it does spill, because coffee spills.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really great segue, right? Because, as two firms that are handling personal injury cases, for every McDonald's coffee case, you have a case where the client is also blatantly lying about what's happened to them, right? Yeah. So whether that is being burned in a drive-through, slipping down an escalator, or, it could be a multitude of different things. How important is it for the client to be very, very honest and upfront about their injury? And why does that matter from the get-go when, sometimes these clients are trying to pursue a payday?
I'll take this one to start, but in my opinion, if you are going to lie to your lawyer that literally you have attorney-client privilege with, and the moment, we find out you do lie, it's a big deal. And it's because, number one, when when Shannon and I and our firms take these types of cases, a lot of times it's on contingency. And for people don't realize, like, we're actually putting money out of our pocket to push your case forward, which is one of the reasons why we get the attorney's fees award we do. We're taking a big risk here. We're not only putting our professional names on the line, we're putting our money behind your story. We weren't there. So if we find out that you misled us or lied to us or just didn't tell us the full truth, it definitely is aggravating. But all things considered, I do give clients, a little bit of leeway when some of them just don't really know what to say. Like, look, they could say, my neck hurts. And they didn't say, this vertebrae in my neck hurts, but maybe it wasn't their neck. Maybe it was a little bit more down their back. I can deal with that. But I definitely think, if the moment I found out a client's, being untruthful with me or misleading me, I don't want to represent them anymore, because if they've already broken that trust with me, like if I can't trust them, I can't convince a jury to trust them. And yeah, we may never get to a jury, but still, I want to know that if I'm going to put the thousands of dollars that it may take to get to a jury, I want to know that I trust the guy, or the girl. So.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with you. Like, because it's a relationship, right? So we have to have trust, mutual trust. They have to trust us, and we have to trust them. Mm-hmm. But I think even more importantly, looking at it from the client's perspective, we can't fully advocate for our clients if we don't know the whole truth. And so a lot of times I have found that clients are fearful to tell me things because they're afraid how it may affect their case. And that may be true, but if I know about it, then I can package things a certain way or go around some certain things, not in an unethical or hide anything. I'm not meaning to suggest that, but I can just steer them, or maybe it's not a big deal at all, but I just need to know about it. And then I'll tell you, hey, it's not going to affect it, or it is, and this is what we should do because of this, or maybe we should try to resolve it before they find out, there's a scribble sheet out there about some procedure that you had back in the day that it would affect the value of your case. So we cannot advocate as attorneys if we don't know the whole truth of our client. And if there's skeletons, we got to know about it. So that way we can advocate better for them.
Yeah. And we've dealt with situations. So there was one time that, one of the things that I do is when I know a case is in litigation, I'm going to grill the client as much as possible, because I expect the attorney on the other side to grill them more intensely. I mean, 90% of the time, I prep my clients well enough to where they don't. There was one instance where, I specifically prepped this client in the past, and it was about, what they were doing on vacations and stuff, because they were posting stuff online. And I remember she was like, oh, well, yeah, I posted all this stuff. I was like, I know you posted it. You know why? Because I went and checked out your Facebook and I saw it. And this is how simple it was. She's like, oh, well, I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to disclose it. I'm like, listen, here's how you can truly be honest with yourself, right? No matter what. And this wasn't this case in particular. When I'm thinking about when an insurance company threatens using social media against me, right? I'm going to say, listen, if you really for 1 second think that you showing my client jet skiing or bike riding is going to negatively impact it to the point where a jury might not feel for them at all, I think I'll take that with you to this. But how are you going to still counter the fact that there is an injury, and we can still make the argument that while they were jet skiing or while they were mountain climbing, they were still having some sort of pain related to that injury. It's not the strongest argument, but hey, at least it gets us back in the race. And that's always been my mindset with it.
Right.
So,
and they don't see them afterwards, right? You can have a great day at the beach and then get home and be in bed all night and medicating yourself and using ice and heat packs because it took a toll on your body, but you decided that you were going to participate in that activity with your family because you have kids, and you were like, okay, I'll just be laid up later. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize it. Like, there's been times I was in a minor accident a while back, and even the slightest injury, even the slightest tap can cause you back injuries. Like, I was out for like a good 3 or 4 months because of it. And I would still go out on my boat and do the stuff that I normally would do, but I still, like, it definitely was not the most comfortable. Like, I couldn't do the things I normally would do without the issues that I was having. So.
Right.
I think that's a great point too. I'm glad like you guys said that, because a lot of pain is sometimes like unseen. You know, I went through a back injury myself, and you know, you're dealing with it, you know, a pinched nerve specifically. And it took me about a year to recover, but I can't put my life on hold for a year, right? I still have to live my life. I still have to work. I still have to get up every morning. And yes, I might be trying to integrate myself back into activities, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not in pain afterwards.
Right.
And a lot of people, so the funny thing is, it's like when we're dealing with adjusters on that side or opposing counsel on that side, from the insurance defense perspective, I'm like, listen, do you guys want me just to like, if my client doesn't go and work and they put a neck brace on and they walk around with a bubble, you're going to go and parade him in front of the jury and say, look at him, you know? And if he does go back to work, you're going to say, look at him. So it's like, I'm just going to run the gauntlet and see what happens, you know?
Yeah.
Right. Well, your life can't stop because you have a lawsuit.
Yeah, exactly. So it's insane. But let's talk about, since we're talking about lawsuits, we're talking about personal injury lawyers, let's talk about a little bit of, you know, some politics, which is rooted here in Central Florida. So there was recently a news article that came out that, you know, I give respect to him because he is definitely the father of legal marketing. And I believe John Morgan is looking like he's running for governor, or he's considering it. And then Dan Newland, which is another pretty prominent personal injury lawyer in Orlando. He was appointed, I believe, the Colombian ambassador.
Yes.
Loves Colombia.
So look, That's what
I've heard.
I have heard that a lot of people, when they were appointed, but when they were tied to Trump, it actually negatively impacted their firm, because people that were anti-Trumpers like they didn't want to go and use them for services. So like Newland would lose. I think from what I heard, Newland might have lost some clients, and then I'm assuming John Morgan, you know, the same thing. He's one of the biggest he advertises to be the biggest personal injury law firm, right?
In the nation.
Yeah. I would think it's a bad move to get into politics because you're automatically polarizing yourself, right? So as a personal injury lawyer in Central Florida, do you think it's a good idea to step into politics in such a, let's say, moderate state? Because we do lean both left and right. What do you think?
I mean, I just think our country is so polarizing right now that I personally want to stay out of politics. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to be in it. I mean, good for them if they're in a position where maybe this is their next step, or maybe this is, you know, they've already accomplished so much, both of them. I think we can all agree they're incredible marketers, have done a fantastic job, pioneers in Central Florida, if not the country, for personal injury law firms. And so maybe this is something that they're passionate about. And I mean, good for them. I do believe that attorneys make good politicians, because I feel like you can be a good politician as an attorney.
Yes, Michael.
But and you guys are laughing. I'm not in on the inside joke.
No, I will tell you right now, because we had this huge discourse about, I think, almost exclusively lawyers or people who have studied the law or government are the only ones who should be politicians, because they understand the law. I was telling him in Trump's first, in his first presidency, he did not even know like the basic thing that you learn in an American government class, which is how a bill becomes a law. So if you're a person who doesn't even understand this and you're running the country, like, I think you should have a much better understanding of what's going on.
But my counter to that is, look, I agree. You should know a little bit about the law if you're going to go be a politician.
More than a little bit.
I clearly opened up a can of worms here.
No, but like if you're going to be an advocate for, you know, and you're going to be the type of person who's going to be enacting legislation, you should know how to do that, and you should know what it's going to do.
But in today's political landscape, as a business owner, I'm looking at it from the eyes of a business owner, right? Because look, I'm definitely look at it and I'm like, look, I'm going to cut we are in such a polarized situation, like Shannon said, that I'm going to lose half of my clientele base, right? And right now, I lean whatever way I lean. No one necessarily knows. Most people can't think I'm a Republican. Most people think I'm a libertarian. Most people probably know I'm not a Democrat, but
No, really?
You don't say. Josh, did you know about this?
I didn't. I'm
but listen,
It's news to
away.
me. You're in a safe place here. I'm good with whatever.
But at the end of the day, I agree with aspects of every single political party. There's things I disagree with every single political party as well, right? And at the end of the day, I don't want my political views to pick my clientele, because I'll tell you what, if you get people that only adhere to who you are in a political sense, you're going to get a shitty group of people, because you're not going to get any diversity, right? And I feel like it's from a business standpoint, I think it's a bad move. But I agree, maybe if you are in that next stage where you've been successful enough in business where you're not worried about taking that 50% potential hit, then yeah, maybe politics is the next step. Maybe doing some change and moving for stuff that you're really passionate about in life through the political process is the way. I think it's so bad, because the scrutiny not only that you come under and your family's going to come under. I mean, look at Joe Biden, for instance. His son is his son got caught with laptop stuff, so on and so forth. But I still think it's shitty to have your personal life dragged out in front of politics. So you're not only subjecting yourself to that, you're subjecting your family to it.
But that's a choice. And I think most politicians, when they go into that, they usually get background checks, they get vetted, they do all of that. And I think Dan Newland and John Morgan are doing just fine. And I think they will also continue to be fine. I
was going to say that. I think at this point in their careers, especially someone like John Morgan, and then, even if it's a lesser extent, but he's still extremely successful, Dan Newland, they've been in the game so long. Yeah. So even Dan Newland, I think you did hit the nail on the head. You are getting into something that's very, very polarizing, but he's already amassed such success. And Dan Newland sponsored a ton of billboards around Central Florida for Donald Trump. And
really,
and beyond,
and beyond, basically, So he sponsored a ton of billboards and put a ton of marketing backing behind Trump's re-election campaign. But I actually do agree with Farah. I think when it comes to politics, I do think that we should have people that are on the outside also representing the everyday person, because a lot of people that are in politics now, they've been in the game so long that they're almost out of touch. And something that you said about knowing the bills and passing them through legislation, I think that that's very, very important, especially when, these are major, major bills that are going to be passed on the floor. You would want somebody who's knowledgeable about the process arguing for it and why it benefits the American people and how to push it through effectively.
But so I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. There's also, did you see two days ago they were about to pass a bill to prevent the government shutdown again, and then Elon Musk went and made a tweet and was like, any politician that votes for the bill should be voted out. And there was a lot of things. There was a lot of earmarks in there where they were allocating a bunch of money to a bunch of shit. One of the things they were doing is upping the congressional pay rate from $174 to $200 and something $1,000. So I was at the same time, to go off what Josh said, if you do put people that know how to write bills and laws and stuff in there, they're going to sneak things in there. So it's we're damned if we do. Sorry. Geek.
That happened in court too, and the judge was like, "Oh, good choice."
but I feel like it's you're gonna get screwed one way or the other, So I don't.
Jesus Christ.
Tell them to stop calling.
Well, and to your point, you got as a business owner or just a layperson perspective, which I know you were saying they're kind of out of touch with that now. like you have to understand the ripple effect. I mean, even tort reform,
Yeah.
I mean, that was a ripple effect to people, individuals, like homeowners not being able to fight. I mean, my partner does PIP work, and I mean, that's going away. That's a whole business and employees. I mean, and that's a small scale example, but I mean, there's so many businesses that are going to go out of business or dry up or not be as successful because of the tort reform.
Yeah.
And who are we protecting? Insurance companies who already have a lot of money.
Exactly. And it's all, we did when tort reform came out, I don't know, did you look into like the whole Allstate papers and all that stuff that was coming out around then?
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a thing called the Allstate papers, I believe. And it literally was where I believe it was Allstate hired a firm. What are they called? I can't remember. They're a consulting firm, and they did an analysis. Actually, this will lead into something else that we just pointed out. I just read. So Allstate hired this consulting firm that did an analysis to save money and make more money, right? Increase their profits. The report is very long, but they fought for years to keep it from ever coming out, and it ended up coming out. And when the report came out, it literally indicated like it was some crazy stuff, like you deny a certain amount of claims, only of those denials a certain amount will contest the denials. Therefore, the ones that if you deny 10 and 9 of them don't contest it, you're saving X amount of dollars. And I was like, that's so crazy. But then to show how that impacted the industry as a whole, the reason why, it turns out, remember the Luigi guy that killed the United Healthcare dude?
Oh, that he was using AI to reject like 90% of claims.
And there was like a 70% rate of like inefficiency, or a 70% issue in that AI programming. So if you look at it, like, once again, it was a shitty situation. That guy died. But it goes to show, like, look, this is what the industry is doing. It doesn't benefit anyone but the industry. And the industry is an imaginary concept. It's just shareholders.
Right.
So it's so because those same shareholders that are getting money from these stocks and profits, their homeowners insurance rates are going up. Their car insurance rates are going up. It's the dumbest thing.
But maybe that's kind of why he wants to get involved, because a lot of people were blaming, the bigger PI firms for all of this tort reform too. So maybe he wants to get in on it to see if he can make the change and not be necessarily blamed for it, or try to make it in a way that's going to be more aligned with PI attorneys.
Yeah, I just feel bad though. Like John Morgan running for governor. One of the big things that I think would be really funny though is just watching the comment section. I reposted one of the articles, and I went through the comments, and I'm not even going to say any of them, but it was pretty bad. It was intense. So
actually, based on his billboards, I can't wait for the commercials.
Yeah.
Those are going to be really good.
He has a great marketing team. But that's a great segue to kind of wrap everything up. Shannon, you run a very, very successful firm, and you've been in the game a long time. We have new attorneys who listen to this podcast, or people that are pursuing a career in law that listen to this podcast. What's some advice that you can give to a newer attorney trying to build their brand?
Oh, jeez. Don't go into law. No,
okay, that's it, folks.
And with that, no. Trying to build your brand. I have this conversation all the time with younger attorneys, including ones in my office. And I think the best advice that I would give is patience.
Yeah.
And I'm a very impatient person, so I have to listen to myself with that advice as well. It doesn't happen overnight. So you can't become well known or have your brand stick. It's branding, and it takes a long time. I think 7 times for someone to see you to remember, and then you're in a competitive market in Central Florida if it's personal injury that you're focused on, and also you're not really competing with everybody out there. So to Mike's point, we're both personal injury attorneys, and we're competitors, but people that might want his firm might, not want mine, and vice versa. And that's okay. And there's a lot out there. And so just focus on what your mission is and what your brand is, and be patient and stay the course, and it will fall into place as it should. in the time it's supposed to.
Yeah, very well said. I mean, I've only been practicing for 5 years, but I've been in the legal realm since I was 17. And I knew I'm fortunate. I knew from a very young age I was going to be a lawyer.
20 years, folks. 20 years.
I made it a point to develop that out every single moment of my life from like middle school, right, Josh?
Mike was the very first friend I made when I moved down to Orlando, Florida, in the 8th grade. And from the moment I met him, he wanted to be a lawyer.
So
I remember going to, he was a paralegal, or he was helping, he was working at multiple law firms. And I remember even in high school, being like the youngest people in the room at some of like these parties that he'd have me tag along with him too.
Yeah, I worked for Carlos Diaz-Arguelles, which is another local attorney. And, it was a very eye-opening profession, introduction to the profession. And the only thing I would say is if you want to be a lawyer, you need to tell people you want to be a lawyer, number one, and show people you're a lawyer. And I think that's going to do itself, because people are going to identify with you as a person, and they're going to want to hire you because you relate to them. And there's different attorneys for different clients. There's so many cases out there. The beautiful thing about it is no matter what, there's always got to be 2 attorneys on a case, right? A plaintiff's lawyer and a defense lawyer. So there's so much business to go around. There's, it is a tough profession. It is tough to get into and get out there and start your own firm. But listen, if we could do it, anyone can do it. And that's one thing I've been really promoting with a lot of my friends is they're stepping out from working for other people, and they're doing it themselves. And dude, with the tools that are out there now, it's possible. It's just, you gotta be passionate about it. So
really, really great advice from you both. Well, Shannon, thank you so much for taking the time to be on today. We really, really appreciate it. We're going to leave her firm's contact information and everything and, the details below. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Only Lawsuits podcast. Shout out to all of the global listeners that have been tuning in every week. If you like what you see, make some suggestions and, leave them in the comments below. And until next time.
Peace.
Peace.